What is going on, everyone? My name is Tino Fera, and welcome back to another episode of the NLL Flash. We've been off for a few weeks, a little bit of a hiatus, some scheduling issues, some stuff going on behind the scenes, but we're back after a little bit of a prolonged vacation, we'll call it. And we're back ready to get you set and ready to go for Week 16 in the National Lacrosse League. We got a big episode here. We got a big guest to preview our Flash game of the week, as per usual. I don't know if I can say as per usual if we've taken this many weeks off, but I'm going to say it anyways. As per usual, we do have an awesome guest here to preview our game of the week. But I got some transactions to fill you guys in for. It's been a little while since I've gotten to look at the transaction page. So let's just dive into it here as we get closer and closer to the trade deadline. Things are going to heat up here, and we saw a little bit of action this week. So two moves to tell you about, just go in order here. Greg Downing gets moved from the Albany Firewolves over to the Toronto Rock in exchange for a second rounder in this upcoming draft, the 2023 draft. And then Saskatchewan parts ways with Marshall Powless, sending him over to Albany for a second rounder in 2025. So short week in terms of the transactions. Like I said, I'm sure that's going to heat up here as we approach the trade deadline, but just wanted to fill you guys in there before we get too far in the program. All right, and as per usual, we did once again go to you guys, the viewers, the listeners, the fans, to help us decide our Flash game of the week, helps us decide what our coverage is going to look like this weekend, as well as what we're going to talk about here on this show. And like always, you guys came through sending 35% of the votes towards the Saskatchewan Rush game against the Calgary Roughnecks. So that is the 5-6 Saskatchewan Rush, currently on the outside looking in terms of a playoff spot, taking on the 8-4 Calgary Roughnecks, looking to solidify their place in this playoff run in the West. So that game's going this Friday, March 17th, St. Patty's Day, at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 9 p.m. Eastern, at the Scotiabank Saddle Dome in Calgary. All right, joining me now on the show for the first time ever is the voice of the Saskatchewan Rush, Mr. Cody Janzen. Of course, you can hear his voice live on TSN, ESPN, and also on the Rush Radio Network, which, Cody, that's my first question for you, man. I don't know if any other team is doing these away team broadcasts. You guys might be the only team doing it. I have to fact check that in a little bit, I guess. But either way, what's that been like since this season? So thank you for joining us. But yeah, what's that ride been like so far?
It's been awesome. Again, I mean, anytime you get to, work in lacrosse, call the game you love, it's great. I think Rochester and Buffalo are the two out east doing it. I don't think there's any more West teams. It's kind of been one of those things where I think that there is a huge demand for it, but it also means that teams do have to make an investment and put resources into it. So I've been lucky enough with the Saskatchewan Rush and their new ownership that really do understand how much content is king and giving fans that local option where it's not like the ESPN plus TSN plus crews do a bad job by any means, but now you're opening up the door for more interaction. You're opening up the door for, a place where your fans feel like they can get the angle they want to hear. And so I'd love to see every team in the league do it. I think that there is a huge market for that audio radio side, but again, just broadcasting the games and getting the awareness out there is what the NLL needs.
Yeah, I gotta say, man, I'm based out of Vancouver here, and the more that I tune into your guys' radio broadcast of these things, the more I'm just dying to hear a Warriors broadcast on the road or something, so I don't have to have the TSN streaming through my car when I'm driving to work. But anyways, I digress. Let's hop into the Flash game of the week here, which, of course, as we mentioned earlier in the show, is your Rush taking on the Calgary Roughnecks. And kind of going back to last season, even the Rush had such a strong finish to the season. And then again, it turned into a hot start to start off this season as well. But as of late, they've been kind of struggling a little bit, having a couple losses in that category there. So I'm curious to hear what your take is on how would you assess the Rush's season so far as a whole?
Well, I think up and down, you put it kind of a fair way, right? There's been a lot of bright spots, and there's also been times where you shake your head because there's just no words to explain it. I really also think that there's a little bit of maybe overreaction isn't the right word, but I also think that, people want to write this team off already this season. And I would not call that the case at all. I really think that in the West, or in the NLL, it doesn't matter how you get into the playoffs, just get in the dance and you've got a chance. And so I just think that Saskatchewan, maybe it is a little bit of retooling. Maybe it's given guys a different look. Like everyone saw what happened when Clark Walter got into the lineup, and we had been talking about that for a few weeks now. Is that there's a lot of talent, there's a lot of guys who are going to push and going to play hard on this team. It's about, getting them the opportunities and letting the guys run with it. There's a ton of good veterans on this team, but you're also dealing with a young core of 10, 11 guys, mostly defenders, that are in their first couple of seasons in the league. So you have to expect growing pains. There's no reason why you could be expecting this team to be 10-1 or 9-2 at this point, because that's not really realistic with the group you have. It kind of reminds me of, a 2012 Edmonton Rush team when they were 6-10, snuck into the playoffs, went all the way to the final. And on those teams too, you had 10, 11 guys, mostly defenders, that were in their first couple of seasons in the league. So there is a lot of similarities. And I just think that the expectations maybe weren't adjusted accordingly based on the way that this team was rolling at the end of last season. I guess you're fair to say that.
I'm so glad you brought up Clark Walter, because he's the person that I was going to ask you about next. Because the Rush as a whole have had so much production and so much growth when it comes to their young guys in the team. But specifically with Clark Walter, I'd love to know, in your eyes, what have you liked about his game and how you've seen him grow, but also just about the young guys as a whole. What can you say about their development so far this season?
If you watch Clark Walter's game, he almost reminds me of a young Marty Dinsdale, but a lefty. There's a lot of similarities, and I know he's a Poco guy. Dinsdale's Coquitlam, but there's a lot of similarities in their game. They can run and shoot on the fly. They love opening up space for guys to shoot. They're not afraid to go and get in the dirty areas. I think Walter's got what, 11, 12 loose balls in his first 3 games as well as a forward. And that is in some limited roles as well, especially in that first game against Calgary that he played. But there's just so much there that we've seen out of Clark Walter that I really think that he kicked the door open and said, I want my opportunity. I'm going to show why I deserve to be in this league. And that's what he's done over the past couple of games. So is scoring 5 a shock? Yeah, of course. I mean, he's a rookie, so he puts 5 in. No one's really expecting that. But I also don't think it's unrealistic to expect that Clark Walter's a regular in this league, because when he's on his game, that's where he should be. As for other guys who have stood out, I think, Barnable's looked awesome. I don't know how many good things you can keep saying about Barnable, Boudreau, and those young defenders, but the future's bright. The way that they push the floor, the way that they battle, the way that they cause loose balls, turnovers, there's just something special building out the back eight for Saskatchewan again, and it all starts with Barnable and Boudreau, really.
You mentioned earlier about how there may be a little bit of an overreaction from some people talking about the Rush, and maybe this question is a little bit of an overreaction as well. But just with the results that the Rush have been seeing lately, do you see a world where Eric Penny gets some starts and gets a little bit of run as the starter here?
I don't see that happening. I think that, yeah, maybe that would be a little bit of an overreaction. I know that there's a lot of fans that do want to take out their frustration on Bouquet, but you have to look at it from a bigger picture. If he was letting in, you'd call them low grade goals, low quality chances. I think that there's a lot more cause for concern. But look at San Diego's goals against Alex Bouquet last weekend. Look at Vancouver's. Look at Calgary's. They're all within a matter of feet from the net, it seems. It's not like there's that many weak goals going in on Bouquet. So I have a really hard time blaming him. And I think that everyone who watches it from an even keel would fully agree that, yes, there's probably a few more against Vancouver that he wanted back, which I would say was one of his weaker games. But outside of that, the way San Diego gets out in front, the way that they can score goals, they're just a high danger team in general. And Saskatchewan as a defense didn't have their best game. They weren't bad, but again, it's the same thing against Vancouver, same thing against Calgary. You let your foot off the pedal for a quarter or two in this league, and you're probably going to lose the game because that's just how competitive this league is now. That's how competitive the West is. That I don't put too much blame on Eric Penny. And frankly, I think that some of the games Saskatchewan won, they probably could have lost or been even closer if not for him, including those overtime games. Because those first 3 quarters against San Diego, he stood on his head back in week number 2. And that game in Colorado in the 4th quarter, he made about half a dozen huge stops on Connor Robinson.
We've already seen Marshall Powless now moved earlier in the week here, and the trade deadline is really just around the corner. Do you see the Rush making any more significant moves as we approach the trade deadline?
I think that this weekend's game against Calgary is going to be your telltale sign of whether are you going to retool or reload here? That's where it comes down to, because you've got some of the best veterans in the league. Everyone knows that. I mean, Mark Matthews is still top 5 in assists. Robert Church can shoot the lights out with anyone. And so you really just have to take into account, I think, where this team is at. And are you going to be going for another run? Or do you want to retool, and find a few younger pieces and try build a championship team in a couple of years or a year or two when San Diego's, going downhill, Colorado's a little bit older? I guess kind of that just becomes the approach that you choose to take. And I think whatever Derek Keenan chooses, it's going to be in the best interest, because that guy's forgot more about lacrosse than I'll ever know. But it's going to come down to, what do the guys in the room feel as well? Do they actually feel that they're 1-2 pieces away from being a championship contender? Because if that's the mindset, and if that's what they're seeing, damn right you should be going for that. But if they're saying, the West is pretty tight, there's a lot of competition, maybe we don't have the same jump we had before, well, then I think you've got to trust your gut as well and say, let's build around some of these other younger pieces and look towards, a year or two down the road.
All right, last one for you here, Cody, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because if my deep dive here is off, I'm the biggest idiot in the world. But I saw when I was looking and prepping for the show that the Rush haven't beat the Roughnecks since March 2nd of 2019. Assuming that that is correct, and I'm not an idiot, what is the biggest factor that you would say is keeping Calgary on top when it comes to this matchup?
Well, I believe you are correct. I think they're 6. They're 1-6 in their last 7 against Calgary since that 2018 Western Conference Final win. And that's, again, if I've got my facts straight. I like to think I'm half smart, but I think you are correct as well. The biggest factor is Christian Del Bianco. I mean, look, it's not even a hot take anymore. He should be the MVP of this league. I've said it, a million times. No disrespect to Jeff Teat or Dane Smith, but if they're not on their respective teams, not as much changes as if Christian Del Bianco wasn't on the Calgary Roughnecks. That's just plain and simple. He is the difference maker. He's the factor that pushes this team over and into being a legitimate contender. And ever since 2019, he has been the guy. Look, pre-2018, it was a different Calgary Roughnecks team. So I think the answer is very simple. And I guess that kind of just comes towards my CDB, conclusion that he's the MVP of this league, and there's no telling me otherwise.
Unreal, man. Cody, thank you so much for joining us here on an episode of NLL Flash. Good luck on the call this weekend, and good luck the rest of the way. Hopefully we'll be able to chat with you real soon.
Always a pleasure talking to you.
Thanks again to Cody Janzen for joining us on this episode of NLL Flash to help us preview the game of the week here, the matchup between the Rush and the Roughnecks. Lots of good insight there, as to be expected from one Cody Janzen. But we got a lot of other games here to tell you about, to fill you in on and get you ready for in Week 16. So let's go down the remaining 7 here throughout the weekend. So we'll start things off on Friday night. The 8-2 San Diego Seals head on down to Rogers Arena to take on the 3-9 Vancouver Warriors, the streaking Vancouver Warriors. All of a sudden they're got some positive vibes in their corner. So we'll see if they can continue to build off that. And these games between the Seals and the Warriors are always pretty heated. So get ready for that one. That's 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern, as I mentioned, at Rogers Arena. So that'll do it for Friday night. Now let's move over to Saturday. Georgia takes on Philly. The 2-8 Georgia Swarm take on the 5-6 Philadelphia Wings. This is a big one for the Wings in terms of their playoff picture moving forward, especially they have 2 games this weekend. So big one in the standings starting off against Georgia this weekend. So that game is an early one out here on the West Coast. That's 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern at the Wells Fargo Center out there in Philly. Later on Saturday, we have the 10-3 Toronto Rock taking on the 5-7 Halifax Thunderbirds, looking to right the ship and get themselves back in the win column. Talking about Halifax there, of course. That game's at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern at the Scotiabank Center. Also on Saturday, the 2-9 Albany Firewolves take on the 3-9 New York Riptide. That one's coming in at 4:30 p.m. Pacific, 7:30 Eastern at the Nassau Coliseum. Saturday as well, we have the 5-6 Colorado Mammoth taking on the 10-2 Buffalo Bandits. That is a rematch of the finals from last year, of course. We'll see, is Colorado going to continue to get healthy? Is Buffalo going to continue to get healthy here? I hope so, because this one is shaping up to be a huge matchup, and we know that we know how hot-headed these teams got when it came to the finals last year. So looking forward to seeing this rematch here. That one is at 4:30 Pacific, 7:30 Eastern at the KeyBank Center in Buffalo. And then the last game on Saturday, because we do have some Sunday lacrosse, ladies and gentlemen, get fired up for that. So last game on Saturday, the 4-7 Vegas Desert Dogs take on the 7-5, the surging Panther City Lacrosse Club. That one is at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern at Dickies Arena. And then wrapping up the weekend, Sunday lacrosse, ladies and gentlemen, get fired up. It's Philly's second game of the weekend. So we'll see how they do on Saturday. They're either going to be 6-6 or they're going to be 5-7 heading to this matchup. We'll see. But that game is against the 9-3 Rochester Nighthawks, 12 p.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern at the Blue Cross Arena. All right, that's going to do it for us here at Lacrosse Flash. Thank you again for joining us for another episode of NLL Flash, and thanks again to Cody Janzen for joining us here to help us preview our Flash Game of the Week. And just again, thank you so much to everybody for sticking with us here, regardless of the brief hiatus. We're going to try to get a run of episodes together here in the final stretch of the season towards the playoff push, and then we're just going to heat up even more come postseason time. So thank you again so much for sticking with us here for another episode. Okay, that's going to do it for all of us here at Lacrosse Flash. I've been Tino Fera, and we'll see you next time.